I always dreamed of speaking English fluently. Every time I heard someone speak fast and confidently, I felt inspired but also frustrated. I had studied English in school, memorized vocabulary, and learned grammar rules, but when it was time to speak, I froze. My mind went blank, and my mouth couldn't form the words. I was afraid of making mistakes and being judged. One day, I looked in the mirror and told myself, if you really want to speak fluently, you must start speaking no matter how hard it is. That was the first step in my journey. I began by speaking to myself every day. I chose simple topics like what I was going to do that day or how I was feeling. I stood in front of the mirror and practiced short sentences. I am happy today, or I want to learn English. At first, it felt awkward and I laughed at myself, but I kept going. The more I spoke, the more confident I became. I didn't care about mistakes. I just wanted to make my mouth used to the sounds of English. This small daily habit started to make a big difference in my confidence. After a few days, I decided to take it further. I found children's books and short stories online and began reading them aloud. This practice helped me with pronunciation and rhythm. I focused on reading slowly and clearly, paying attention to how words were connected in a sentence. Sometimes I would record my voice and then listen to it. I noticed where I sounded unnatural or where I hesitated. With time, I became more aware of my speaking patterns, and I learned to correct myself. Reading out loud was like doing push-ups for my tongue. To improve even more, I started recording myself telling short stories. I would describe my day or talk about a memory. I tried to speak without stopping for a full minute. At first, it was hard to keep going, but I didn't give up. I recorded, listened, and repeated. Each time, I sounded a little better. I discovered that fluency is not about speed, but about flow. The goal was to speak smoothly, even if I spoke slowly at first. Over time, my speech became more natural, and I stopped worrying about mistakes. Finally, I felt ready to talk to real people. I joined a free conversation group online where people from different countries practiced English together. At first, I was very nervous and didn't speak much, but I reminded myself that everyone was learning just like me. I started saying short sentences and asking simple questions. The other learners were kind and patient. With every session, I spoke more and made new friends. I realized that fluency is built through courage, daily practice, and real communication. This was just the beginning of my journey. Chapter 2: The Power of Listening. After I started speaking more, I realized something important. To speak better, I needed to listen more. Listening is like food for your brain. It gives you the sounds, rhythm, and vocabulary you need to speak fluently. So I made a plan to surround myself with English every day. I began watching English movies and series with English subtitles. At first, I just followed the subtitles and tried to repeat what I heard. I paused often, rewound scenes, and listened to the same phrases again and again until they made sense. Slowly, the sentences started to sound more familiar and natural to me. I also discovered the magic of podcasts. I searched for English podcasts about topics I enjoyed like travel, motivation, and everyday life. While walking, cooking, or even cleaning my room, I listened to these voices speaking clearly and naturally. In the beginning, I didn't understand every word, but I didn't let that stop me. I focused on the general idea. I wrote down new expressions I heard and practiced saying them out loud later. My ears began to recognize common patterns and useful phrases that I could use in my own conversations. Eventually, I challenged myself to listen without subtitles. It was not easy, but I tried watching shows I had already seen. Since I already knew the story, it helped me guess the meaning of new words from the context. I paid attention to how people greeted each other, how they expressed emotions, and how they reacted in different situations. I learned more from observing their body language and tone than from textbooks. This helped me become more natural when I spoke and gave me the confidence to use expressions like sounds good or no way in my own speech. Another great tool was music. I listened to English songs and searched for the lyrics online. I would read the lyrics, sing along, and try to memorize parts of the songs. Music made learning feel fun and emotional. I connected with the feelings of the singers and understood how words were used in a real, meaningful way. Some phrases from songs stayed in my head all day, and I found myself using them in conversations without even thinking. Music helped me learn not only vocabulary, but also pronunciation and stress. By focusing on listening, I felt that my brain was finally tuning into English. I was no longer translating everything from my native language. Instead, I was starting to think in English. Listening gave me the input I needed to speak more naturally and smoothly. I understood now that fluency isn't just about speaking. It's about hearing and understanding how the language flows. That realization pushed me forward with more motivation than ever before. Chapter 3: Practice Without Fear. As I kept learning, I faced one of my biggest challenges: fear of speaking in public. Even though I had been practicing alone and with small groups online, speaking with strangers still made me nervous. I was afraid of forgetting words or saying something wrong. But I knew I had to overcome this fear if I wanted to be truly fluent. So I gave myself small goals. Say hello to a tourist in my city, ask a simple question at a coffee shop, or speak to a native speaker online. Each small success gave me more courage. I also learned to stop chasing perfection. I used to think that I needed perfect grammar and pronunciation before I could speak confidently. But that thinking only held me back. Native speakers don't speak perfectly all the time either. They make mistakes, they pause, they change words. I realized that my goal should be communication, not perfection. If people understood me, I was doing well. That simple mindset change helped me speak more freely and enjoy the process. One technique that helped me a lot was shadowing. I would choose a video or podcast with a native speaker and repeat exactly what they said, copying their tone, speed, and rhythm. At first, it was hard to keep up, But after practicing the same clip many times, I began to sound more like them. Shadowing helped me improve my pronunciation, intonation, and speaking speed. It was like training with a coach. I was learning directly from native examples, and my fluency improved quickly. I also started thinking in English more often. When I was walking down the street or waiting for the bus, I described what I saw in English. For example, the man is wearing a blue jacket, or I'm going to the supermarket to buy milk. Thinking in English helped me stop translating from my native language. It made speaking feel more natural and automatic. Over time, I noticed that I could speak longer and faster without stopping to search for words. My confidence continued to grow because I kept showing up every day. Even when I felt tired or unmotivated, I reminded myself why I started. I want to connect with people around the world, travel, and maybe even work in an international job one day. Speaking English fluently wasn't just a goal. It had become a part of who I was becoming. I was proud of my progress, and I was ready to take the next step in my journey. Chapter 4: Real Conversations, Real Progress. To truly improve, I knew I had to speak with native English speakers. Listening and practicing alone were helpful, but real conversations would challenge me to think quickly and use everything I had learned. So I joined a language exchange app where I could talk with people from the US, the UK, and other countries. I was nervous during my first conversation, but I smiled and did my best. I told my partner that I was learning and asked them to speak slowly. Most people were kind and encouraging. During our talks, I learned many natural expressions that I never saw in textbooks. For example, instead of saying, "I'm very tired," people would say, "I'm exhausted." Or they would say, "I'm all ears," to show they were listening. I wrote down these phrases and practiced using them in different sentences. Every conversation taught me something new, not just about the language, but also about the culture and how people really speak in everyday life. I felt like I was learning real English, not just school English. Sometimes I made mistakes or forgot words, and that was okay. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I asked, "How do you say that?" Or, "Can you help me find the word?" Most people were happy to help. I also noticed that my brain started to respond faster. I no longer had to stop and think so much. The words came to me more easily, and I could keep the conversation going without long pauses. It felt like my fluency was becoming real. I made it a habit to talk with at least one person in English every day, even for just 10 minutes. Sometimes it was a quick call, a text conversation, or a voice message. I used apps, joined online meetups, and even played games in English. These daily interactions kept me active and motivated. Every time I spoke, I became more confident and natural. I began to see myself as a real English speaker, not just a learner. By now, English was becoming part of my daily life. I didn't need to force it anymore. I listened, spoke, thought, and even dreamed in English sometimes. I wasn't fluent yet, but I was getting closer every day. The best part was that I enjoyed the journey. Speaking English was no longer something I feared. It was something I loved. And I knew that the more I practiced, the more fluent I would become. Chapter 5, Learning Through Mistakes. As I continued practicing English, I started to understand something very important. Mistakes are not the enemy. In fact, every time I made a mistake, I was learning something new. At the beginning of my journey, I used to feel embarrassed when I said something incorrectly. I would get quiet and nervous, afraid of looking silly. But then I listened to a podcast where an English teacher said, "Mistakes are proof that you are trying." That sentence stayed with me, and from that day on, I stopped feeling ashamed. I gave myself permission to make mistakes as often as necessary, because that's how real fluency is built. One time, I confused the words borrow and lend during a conversation. I told someone, "Can you borrow me your pen?" They smiled and said kindly, "You mean, can you lend me your pen?" I laughed, corrected myself, and thanked them. That moment taught me more than a whole grammar lesson. Real-life correction sticks in your memory. I started writing down every mistake I made and the correct version beside it. I reviewed those notes daily, and over time, I made fewer of the same mistakes. Instead of avoiding errors, I began to welcome them as part of my growth. Another thing I learned was to ask for feedback. When I spoke with native speakers or teachers, I didn't just talk. I also asked questions like, "Was that natural?" Or, "How would you say this?" This helped me sound more like a native speaker and less like a textbook. Sometimes they gave me tips on pronunciation, and other times they offered better words to use. These small pieces of advice helped me refine my speech. I also joined English forums where I could write and get corrections from others. Whether I was speaking or writing, feedback was gold. Over time, I noticed that my brain started correcting itself automatically. When I made a mistake, I would immediately feel it and try again. This awareness was a huge step forward. I wasn't just speaking randomly. I was becoming conscious of how I used the language. My ear was trained by listening, my mouth was trained by speaking, and my mind was trained by learning from my mistakes. Everything was coming together. I didn't fear speaking anymore because every conversation, even the imperfect ones, was making me better. Now, I encourage every learner to stop hiding from mistakes. They're not a sign of failure. They're a sign of progress. Nobody becomes fluent without making hundreds of errors along the way. The key is to keep trying, keep practicing, and keep learning from every single one. That's how we grow. Not by being perfect, but by being brave enough to keep going. Chapter 6, Building Vocabulary the Right Way. One of the things I struggled with was remembering new words. I would learn a list of vocabulary and forget most of it within days. It was frustrating. But then I realized that learning words without context was like collecting puzzle pieces without seeing the full picture. So I changed my approach. Instead of memorizing long lists, I started learning words inside stories, conversations, and songs. When I saw or heard a word being used in a real situation, it became easier to remember. and more fun to use later. I began keeping a vocabulary journal. But instead of just writing the word and its translation, I included an example sentence and a short note about where I saw or heard it. For example, if I learned the word excited, I would write, "I'm excited to see my friend this weekend." Heard in a YouTube vlog that made the word more personal and meaningful to me. I also used colors and drawings to make my journal more interesting. Reviewing it felt like reading a story, not studying a textbook. Another technique I used was the 10x method. When I learned a new word, I try to use it 10 times in different situations during the same day. I would use it in a sentence when speaking to myself, in a voice message to a friend, in an online comment, or even in a made-up story. Repeating the word in real-life situations helped move it from short-term to long-term memory. I didn't just know the word. I could actually use it confidently in a sentence. Flashcards were also helpful, but only when I made them meaningful. I used apps where I could create custom flashcards with audio, example sentences, and images. I practiced every day for a few minutes. The key wasn't just repetition. It was using the words in different ways. Writing, speaking, listening, and reading. That's when vocabulary becomes real and useful. The more variety I used, the deeper the words stuck in my brain. With this new strategy, I noticed a big improvement. I didn't just have more vocabulary. I had more active vocabulary. That means I could actually use the words when I needed them, not just recognize them. And that's what fluency is all about. Not just knowing the language, but being able to live in it, express yourself, and understand others. I was finally building my English in a smart, powerful way. Chapter 7. Immersing myself in English. As my fluency improved, I realized that one of the best ways to continue growing was to create an English-speaking world around me. I didn't need to live in an English-speaking country to do this. I just needed to surround myself with English as much as possible. I changed the language on my phone, my computer, and my favorite apps. At first, it felt a bit uncomfortable, but it forced me to read and understand English naturally. Over time, it became second nature, and I stopped noticing I was even doing it. I also followed English-speaking YouTubers, Instagram accounts, and bloggers. I watched their videos every day and tried to understand their jokes, opinions, and way of speaking. I left comments in English and sometimes even received replies. It felt amazing to be part of real conversations happening in English. I wasn't just learning the language. I was becoming part of an English-speaking community. This kind of exposure helped me pick up idioms, slang, and cultural references that I wouldn't learn from a traditional classroom. Reading became a big part of my immersion. I started with simple books and short stories, then moved on to novels and news articles. I read topics I enjoyed, self-improvement, travel, technology, so it never felt like a chore. I underlined new words, wrote them down, and tried using them later. Reading helped me see how grammar and vocabulary worked in real context. It made my writing better, too. I began writing short posts, journal entries, and even poems in English. One of the most powerful things I did was start thinking in English. Every day, I made the decision to describe my thoughts, my plans, or my feelings in English. At first, I did it slowly and with effort. But over time, it became automatic. I stopped translating from my native language and began forming ideas directly in English. That's when I truly felt the shift. English was no longer a subject I studied. It had become a language I lived in. Through immersion, I was creating my own English-speaking environment, one that was fun, challenging, and full of opportunities to grow. I didn't need permission, a perfect accent, or a plane ticket. I just needed consistency and curiosity. The more I lived in English, the more fluent I became. And best of all, I was enjoying every part of the process. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to talk about something very important: how to make your mind think in English. Many people study English for years, but they still think in their native language. This habit makes speaking English more difficult because their brain is not trained to process words directly in English. Instead, they translate everything before speaking, which slows them down and causes mistakes. To achieve fluency, you need to change the way your mind works. In this series, I will show you practical techniques to train your brain to think directly in English. If you follow these steps and practice consistently, you will see a big improvement in your ability to speak naturally and confidently. Chapter 1: Why thinking in English is important. When you start thinking in English, you will be able to speak faster and more naturally. Many learners struggle with fluency because they try to translate every sentence in their head before speaking. This process takes time and often leads to awkward pauses or incorrect sentences. Native speakers do not translate. They think directly in their language, which allows them to speak effortlessly. If you want to reach this level, you must train your brain to process information in English without depending on translation. This will not only help you improve your fluency, but also make conversations smoother and more enjoyable. Another advantage of thinking in English is that it helps you build confidence. Many learners feel nervous when speaking because they're unsure about their words or grammar. This hesitation creates anxiety and makes them afraid of making mistakes. However, when you train your mind to think in English, you develop a natural flow of speech. You won't need to stop and translate before responding, which will make you sound more fluent and self-assured. Confidence is key to effective communication, and thinking in English is a great way to achieve it. Additionally, training your brain to think in English will improve your listening skills. If you always translate what you hear into your native language, your brain works slower and you may struggle to keep up with conversations. However, if you can understand English directly, you will process information much faster. This ability will help you follow conversations, watch movies without subtitles, and understand native speakers more easily. The more you practice, the more natural it will become. Another important benefit is that it helps you internalize grammar and sentence structures. When you think in English, your brain gets used to the natural way sentences are formed. You don't need to memorize complicated grammar rules because your mind will absorb the patterns through exposure. Over time, your sentences will sound more natural and you will make fewer grammatical mistakes. This method is much more effective than simply studying rules without using them in real life. Finally, thinking in English allows you to fully immerse yourself in the language. You will start to dream in English, think about your daily activities in English, and even express your emotions in English. The more you surround yourself with the language, the more comfortable and fluent you will become. This is why thinking in English is not just a skill. It is a necessary step toward achieving fluency. Chapter 2. Start with simple words. The first step to training your brain to think in English is to start using simple words in your thoughts. Many learners try to think in English, but get frustrated because they don't know advanced vocabulary. However, you don't need complicated words to start. Focus on basic words and short sentences. For example, when you see an apple, say apple in your mind instead of your native word. When you look at a chair, think, this is a chair. It is brown. It is big. The goal is to build a habit of using English words in your daily life. To make this process easier, try describing things around you in English. If you are in your room, look at different objects and name them. Think about their color, shape, and function. For example, instead of thinking, este es mi escritorio, say, this is my desk. It is made of wood. I use it to study. If you don't know a word, look it up in a dictionary and try to remember it. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel. Another useful technique is labeling objects in your home. Write English words on small pieces of paper and stick them to furniture, appliances, and everyday items. This method helps your brain associate objects with English words automatically. Every time you see the word mirror on your mirror, your brain reinforces the connection. Eventually, you'll stop translating and start thinking in English naturally. It is also important to practice forming simple sentences in your head. Throughout the day, try to describe what you're doing in English. For example, when you wake up, think, I am getting out of bed. I feel tired. I need to brush my teeth. When you cook, think, I am making breakfast. I am frying eggs. They smell delicious. By making this a habit, your brain will become more comfortable processing thoughts in English. The key is consistency. At first, it may feel unnatural, but with practice, it will become automatic. Start small, be patient, and gradually increase the complexity of your thoughts. Over time, You will notice that thinking in English becomes effortless, and you will feel more confident in your ability to speak fluently. Chapter 3. Immerse yourself in English every day. To make your mind think in English, you need to surround yourself with the language as much as possible. The more exposure you have to English, the easier it will be for your brain to process it naturally. One of the best ways to do this is by listening to English daily. You can listen to podcasts, watch movies, or play English music. Even if you don't understand everything, your brain is still absorbing the sounds, rhythms, and patterns of the language. Over time, this exposure will help you think more easily in English. Reading in English is another great way to train your mind. Start with simple texts such as children's books, articles, or social media posts. Try to read without translating every word. Instead, focus on understanding the general meaning. This method helps your brain associate words with their meanings naturally, without relying on translation. As you improve, challenge yourself with more complex books and articles. Reading in English regularly will improve your vocabulary and make thinking in English much easier. Speaking to yourself in English is also a powerful technique. Throughout the day, try to narrate your actions in English. For example, when cooking, say, "Now I am cutting vegetables. The knife is sharp. I'm making a salad." This simple habit forces your brain to think in English and strengthens your speaking skills. If you don't know a word, describe it using words you already know. This will help you become more flexible with the language. Another great way to immerse yourself in English is by changing the language settings on your phone, computer, and apps. This small change forces you to interact with English every day. At first, it might be difficult, but over time, your brain will adapt. The more you see and use English, the more natural it will feel. Finally, try to surround yourself with people who speak English. If you have friends or classmates who speak English, practice with them. If not, join online communities, language exchange groups, or even speak with AI assistants in English. The key is to use English as much as possible in your daily life. The more you immerse yourself in the language, the faster you will start thinking in English naturally. Chapter 4. Train your brain with daily exercises. Training your brain to think in English requires daily practice. One effective exercise is the 5-minute thinking challenge. Set a timer for 5 minutes and try to think only in English. You can think about what you did today, what you will do tomorrow, or describe your surroundings. If you do this exercise every day, your brain will become more comfortable with English thoughts. Over time, you can increase the duration to 10 or 15 minutes. Writing is another great way to train your brain. Try to write a short journal entry in English every day. You can write about your feelings, your goals, or something interesting that happened. Writing helps organize your thoughts in English and improves your ability to express yourself. Don't worry about making mistakes. Just focus on expressing your ideas. The more you write, the more natural thinking in English will become. Another useful technique is speaking out loud. Choose a topic and talk about it for 1 or 2 minutes in English. You can talk about your favorite food, your hobbies, or your plans for the weekend. If you don't know a word, try to explain it using other words. This method forces your brain to think creatively in English. Using flashcards can also help you train your mind. Write English words on one side and their meanings or pictures on the other. Review them daily and try to use the words in sentences. This practice will help you remember vocabulary more easily and reinforce your ability to think in English. Lastly, visualization is a powerful tool. Close your eyes and imagine a situation, such as ordering food at a restaurant or traveling to a new city. Try to imagine the conversation in English. This mental exercise will prepare you for real-life situations and make thinking in English feel more natural. Chapter 5. Be patient and stay consistent. Learning to think in English is not something that happens overnight. It takes time, patience, and consistent practice. Many learners feel frustrated because they expect quick results, but language learning is a gradual process. The key is to keep practicing every day, even if progress feels slow. Small improvements add up over time, and eventually, you will notice that thinking in English becomes easier and more automatic. One of the most important things to remember is to not be afraid of making mistakes. Many learners hesitate to speak or think in English because they fear saying something wrong. However, mistakes are a natural part of learning. Every time you make a mistake, you learn something new. Instead of focusing on perfection, focus on progress. The more you practice, the fewer mistakes you will make. Staying motivated is also crucial. Set small goals for yourself, such as thinking in English for 5 minutes a day or writing a short paragraph in English. Celebrate your achievements, no matter how small. Learning a new language is challenging, but every step you take brings you closer to fluency. It is also helpful to track your progress. Keep a journal where you write about your experiences learning English. Write down new words you learn, challenges you face, and improvements you notice. Looking back at your progress will help you stay motivated and see how much you have improved. Finally, make learning English fun. Find ways to enjoy the process, such as watching your favorite movies in English, playing word games, or talking with friends. The more you enjoy learning, the more motivated you will be to practice. Thinking in English is a skill that requires time and dedication, but with patience and consistency, you will achieve fluency. Chapter 6. Stop translating and start associating. One of the biggest obstacles to thinking in English is the habit of translating. Many learners translate every word from their native language before speaking, which slows them down and makes conversations difficult. To think in English, you need to break this habit and start associating words directly with their meanings. A great way to do this is by using images instead of translations. For example, if you learn the word apple, don't think of the word in your native language. Instead, picture an apple in your mind. This method helps your brain create direct connections between words and their meanings without relying on translation. Another technique is using simple definitions in English. If you don't know a word, try to describe it instead of translating it. For example, if you forget the word chair, you can say it's something you sit on. This practice strengthens your ability to think in English and helps you become more independent with the language. You can also train your brain by playing word association games. Choose a word and think of related words in English. For example, if you pick beach, you can think of words like sand, ocean, waves, and sun. This activity helps your mind stay in English and builds your vocabulary naturally. Finally, practice using English-only dictionaries. Instead of looking up translations, use an English dictionary to find explanations in English. This method forces your brain to process information in English, helping you think more naturally in the language. Chapter 7. Think in simple sentences first. Many learners struggle with thinking in English because they try to form complex sentences in their minds. At the beginning, it's important to keep your thoughts simple. Instead of trying to think in long, complicated sentences, start with short and clear ideas. For example, if you see a dog, you can think that dog is big. If you're hungry, you can think, I want to eat something. These simple sentences will help your brain get used to forming thoughts in English without feeling overwhelmed. Once you feel comfortable with simple sentences, you can start expanding them. Instead of saying, that dog is big, you can say that big dog is running in the park. Gradually adding details will help you build more complex thoughts in English. Another helpful exercise is describing what you see around you. For example, if you're in a room, think, there's a table. The table is brown. It has a book on it. This practice helps your brain form sentences quickly and naturally. It's also useful to practice thinking about your daily plans in English. In the morning, try to say to yourself, today I will go to work. After work, I will buy groceries. This habit will help you get used to organizing your thoughts in English. Remember, thinking in English is like building muscle. You have to start small and keep practicing until it becomes natural. The more you train your brain with simple sentences, the easier it will be to form complex thoughts over time. Chapter 8. Use context to guess words. A common problem for English learners is getting stuck when they don't know a word. Instead of stopping and looking for a translation, train yourself to guess the meaning using context. This technique will help you think in English more smoothly and improve your comprehension skills. For example, if you read a sentence like, she grabbed her umbrella because it was raining, you might not know the word umbrella. However, you can guess its meaning because it is related to rain. This method allows you to keep thinking in English without relying on translation. Another strategy is paying attention to words that are similar to your native language. Many languages share similar vocabulary, especially in academic or technical fields. Words like information, hospital, and problem exist in many languages with similar meanings. Recognizing these words can help you understand new sentences more easily. You can also practice this skill by reading books or watching movies with subtitles in English. When you see an unfamiliar word, try to understand it from the situation before checking the dictionary. This exercise strengthens your ability to think in English and makes learning new vocabulary more natural. Finally, try to guess words when speaking. If you don't know how to say something, use the words you already know to describe it. For example, if you forget the word refrigerator, you can say, "It's a machine that keeps food cold." This practice helps you stay in English and improves your fluency. Chapter 9. Surround yourself with English speakers. The best way to train your brain to think in English is by surrounding yourself with people who speak English. When you're in an English-speaking environment, your brain has no choice but to process information in English. If you live in a country where English is not common, you can still create an English-speaking environment. Join online communities, language exchange programs, or social media groups where people communicate in English. Talking to real people in English will force your brain to think quickly and naturally. Another effective method is shadowing, which means repeating what native speakers say. Choose an English podcast or video and try to repeat the sentences immediately after hearing them. This practice helps your brain process English faster and improves your pronunciation. You can also find a language partner. There are many apps and websites that connect language learners with native speakers. Having regular conversations in English will help you get used to thinking in the language without translating. If you have the opportunity, travel to an English-speaking country. Being in a place where everyone speaks English will force you to use the language in real-life situations. Even if you don't travel, try to put yourself in situations where you need to speak English, such as attending language meetups or ordering food in English at a restaurant. The more you surround yourself with English speakers, the more natural it will become to think in English. The key is to stay consistent and practice as much as possible. Chapter 10. Keep practicing and never give up. Learning to think in English is a long journey, but if you stay dedicated, you will see progress. Many people give up because they feel it's too difficult, but the secret to success is persistence. One way to stay motivated is by setting clear goals. For example, challenge yourself to think in English for 10 minutes every day or to write a short journal entry in English every night. Setting small goals will help you stay focused and make learning more enjoyable. It's also important to track your progress. Keep a record of new words you learn, thoughts you successfully expressed in English, or moments when you understood English without translating. Looking back at your progress will remind you how far you've come and keep you motivated. Surround yourself with positive influences. Follow English-speaking content creators. Read inspiring stories about language learners, and talk to people who encourage you. Having a positive mindset will make the learning process much easier. Finally, remember that mistakes are part of learning. Don't be afraid to make errors when speaking or thinking in English. Every mistake is an opportunity to improve. The more you practice, the better you will become. Thinking in English is a skill that requires time and effort, but if you stay consistent, you will achieve fluency. Keep practicing, stay motivated, and never give up. You're closer to thinking in English than you think. Chapter 11. Overcoming mental blocks. One of the biggest challenges in thinking in English is overcoming mental blocks. Many learners experience moments when they suddenly feel unable to form sentences or express their thoughts, even if they know the words. This happens because their brain is still relying on their native language to organize thoughts, making the transition to English more difficult. To overcome this, it's important to train your brain to react in English instead of freezing when you don't know a word or phrase. One way to do this is by practicing circumlocution, which means explaining something using different words. For example, if you forget the word fridge, instead of panicking, you can say, "It's the machine that keeps food cold." This forces your brain to stay in English without depending on translation. Another way to break mental blocks is to practice speaking aloud even when you're alone. Many people fear making mistakes, which leads them to hesitate before speaking. By talking to yourself in English, whether describing your actions, expressing your thoughts, or even reading aloud, you help your brain become more comfortable with forming sentences quickly and naturally. It's also helpful to practice speaking without worrying too much about grammar. While grammar is important, focusing too much on perfect sentences can slow down your thinking process. Instead, prioritize communication and fluency. The more you practice thinking and speaking freely, the faster your brain will adapt to English. Lastly, remember that mistakes are not failures. They are part of the learning process. Instead of being afraid of errors, embrace them as opportunities to improve. Every time you struggle to find a word or form a sentence, you're training your brain to think in English more efficiently. Chapter 12. Expanding your thought process in English. At the beginning of your English learning journey, you might only be able to form simple sentences in your mind. However, as you improve, it's important to expand your thought process by making your sentences more complex and detailed. This helps you develop a deeper understanding of English and improves your ability to express yourself fluently. One way to do this is by adding details to your thoughts. Instead of thinking the weather is nice, you can expand it to the weather is nice today because the sun is shining and there's a cool breeze. By gradually adding more information, you train your brain to structure longer thoughts in English. Another strategy is to practice connecting ideas. In conversations, native speakers don't just say one sentence at a time. They link their ideas together smoothly. To do this, practice using words like because so, however, and although. For example, instead of saying, I like coffee, it tastes good, you can say, I like coffee because it has a rich flavor and it gives me energy in the morning. You can also challenge yourself by thinking about abstract concepts in English. Instead of just describing what you see, try to express your opinions or emotions. For example, instead of just saying, I am happy today, think, I feel happy today because I had a great conversation with a friend and I accomplished an important task. This forces your brain to work with more complex ideas. Expanding your thought process in English takes practice, but the more you push yourself to think in full, detailed sentences, the easier it will become. Over time, you will find that your ability to express yourself naturally in English improves significantly. Chapter 13, Developing an English Mindset. Thinking in English is not just about knowing words and grammar. It's also about adopting an English-speaking mindset. This means training yourself to approach problems, conversations, and learning experiences the way a native English speaker would. When you immerse yourself in the culture and thought patterns of the language, your ability to think in English improves dramatically. One way to develop this mindset is by observing how native speakers express themselves. Watch interviews, listen to podcasts, and pay attention to how people structure their thoughts. Notice how they describe situations, how they use idioms, and how they react in conversations. The more you expose yourself to natural English, the more your brain will absorb these patterns. Another important aspect is understanding cultural context. English speakers often communicate differently than speakers of other languages. For example, in English, indirect expressions are commonly used to sound polite. Instead of saying, "Give me water," a native speaker would say, "Could I have a glass of water, please?" Being aware of these cultural differences helps you think more naturally in English. You can also practice putting yourself in an English-speaking mindset by imagining everyday scenarios. Think about how you would order food at a restaurant, how you would introduce yourself in a job interview, or how you would respond to a casual conversation. Running these mental simulations in English will help you become more confident when you face real situations. Lastly, adopt the mindset of a lifelong learner. Thinking in English is not something you achieve overnight. It's a continuous process of improvement. Stay curious, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. The more you embrace the English-speaking mindset, the more natural your thinking process will become. Chapter 14. Using writing to strengthen your thoughts. While speaking and listening are essential for thinking in English, writing is another powerful tool that can help you train your brain. Writing forces you to slow down and organize your thoughts, making it an excellent way to practice thinking in English clearly and effectively. A great exercise is journaling in English. Every day, write a few sentences about your thoughts, your plans, or what happened during the day. The goal is not to be perfect, but to practice expressing yourself in English without translating. Over time, you will notice that your ability to think in English improves as you become more comfortable with forming sentences. Another effective writing activity is storytelling. Choose a simple topic and write a short story in English. For example, write about a trip you took, an interesting experience, or even an imaginary adventure. This helps your brain get used to describing situations in English and using different types of vocabulary. Writing dialogues is also a great way to simulate real conversations. Imagine a conversation between two people and write it down as naturally as possible. This exercise helps you think about common phrases, sentence structures, and ways to express different emotions in English. Additionally, try summarizing what you read or watch in English. After reading an article or watching a video, write a short summary in your own words. This forces your brain to process the information in English and strengthens your ability to express ideas clearly. By incorporating writing into your practice, you give your brain more opportunities to think in English. Over time, you'll find that forming thoughts in English becomes much easier and more natural. Chapter 15. Making English a permanent part of your life. The final step in thinking in English is making it a permanent part of your daily life. The more you integrate English into your routine, the more automatic your thought process will become. This means surrounding yourself with English in every possible way. Start by adjusting your daily habits. Change your phone and computer settings to English. Follow English-speaking influencers and consume as much English content as possible. The more exposure you have, the more your brain will adapt to thinking in English. Engage in English conversations regularly. Whether it's with friends, language partners, or online communities, speaking English daily helps reinforce your ability to think in the language. If you don't have access to English speakers, practice speaking to yourself or recording your voice to track your progress. Another way to make English a permanent part of your life is to start thinking in English about everything. When making decisions, ask yourself in English, what should I do next? When planning your day, think, I need to go shopping, then I will cook dinner. These small changes make a big difference over time. Lastly, stay committed to the process. Thinking in English is a skill that requires patience and practice, but the more you immerse yourself, the faster you will improve. Keep challenging yourself, stay motivated, and enjoy the journey. Soon, thinking in English will feel as natural as thinking in your native language.